Let's talk right now. I said Ralph, but it's Rafe. Rafe Heydel Mankoo is a world commentator, historian, and a senior fellow at the New Culture Forum, who joins us now to talk about a couple of other very interesting stories in the news. A very, very good morning to you, Rafe.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Let's talk first of all about the King and the Queen. They have arrived last night in Canada, where the King is attending the opening of Parliament, the Canadian Parliament, and he's going to be giving a key speech there. How significant is this, given that it's basically the first time in about 50 years that a British monarch has gone to this event? And how significant is it in the context of Donald Trump, the southern neighbour of Canada, threatening to annex the country, which of course still has the same monarch as us as their head of state?
Yeah, this is the most consequential royal visit to Canada since 1990, when the late Queen visited Canada, when you had the Quebec secession reference, when, Canada came very close to being broken up into two. At that time, the Queen said, "I'm not just a fair weather friend, I'm here for the good times and the bad." And you could argue that that phrase could apply just as much to King Charles's visit, given that Canada is facing its most significant crisis since then, with, of course, epic trolling from Donald Trump, calling for Canada to become the 51st state, calling the then Prime Minister Trudeau, Governor Trudeau, huge tariffs and so forth. And so the Canadian government has finally rediscovered the monarchy after 50 years being rather embarrassed by it. Canadian monarchists wanted the Queen to come in 2002 and 2012 to open Parliament to mark her golden and diamond jubilees, as she had done for her silver jubilee. The Canadian government said, no, we're going to Canadianize the institution, just focus on the Governor-General. But isn't it funny how in times of crisis, the value of the monarchy as an asset?
Well, it is interesting, the statement. So we saw, the King greeting Mark Carney, and was on a visit, and the support there. And again, this is a very, very fine diplomatic tightrope that the King has got to walk. And of course, there'll be a lot of guidance from Number 10. People always get, the palace doesn't decide these things. Number 10 decides these things. That's the reality. And it's about showing support for Canada, but also not wanting to anger Donald Trump, even though the stuff he said about Canada is frankly an outrage.
Well, of course, just to correct you slightly, number 10 is not involved in this at all. It's number 24 Sussex Drive in Ottawa.
No, there's no way that the King goes and does this without number 10 giving the sign-off. Come on.
No, I'm terribly sorry. I'm a trustee of the Canadian Royal Heritage Trust. Believe me, I'm fully embedded in Canadian politics. Yeah. The King acts entirely independently as King of Canada. The Prime Minister of the UK has no right to advise the King of Canada. This is the Prime Minister of Canada advising the King. And of course, he wears many, many crowns. The fact is, of course, the King does have to walk a diplomatic tightrope because, yes, as King of the UK, he has invited the President to a state visit. That went down very poorly in Canada. Canadians were very upset about that invitation, and this is a way for the King actually to show that he is equally King of Canada. But of course, what he says matters. Now, the words coming out of his mouth will be actually Prime Minister Carney's words, because this is a speech from the throne, His Majesty's Canadian government, and so he won't only be reading out the platform of the government, he will actually be making some references towards Canadian sovereignty. But on that, of course, I'm perfectly sure that Mark Carney is bearing in mind the need to be careful about not stepping on starboard toes.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. This will be hugely diplomatic with everybody. I mean, whether or not they officially have a say, there's always you might find, Your Majesty, that you're a little bit busy that Tuesday, but he's not busy that Tuesday, and it's about sending that message. I do want to get in also as to, you and I often talk about sort of diversity, equality, and DEI issues, and the woke world, and it's very interesting actually. A little bit later in the show, we're going to be talking to the brilliant Andrew Doyle about his brand new book about the end of woke. I'm hoping he's right. I don't know if it is the end of woke or not, but it's an interesting new research by JL Partners. They did a survey of people in their offices, and a survey of 823 white men for a YouTube series, White Men Can't Work, concluded that almost half of white men say they are self-censoring at work for fear of causing offence. Almost a quarter believe they experience discrimination now because of their race and their gender. What do you make of that?
Well, no one should be surprised by this at all, As somebody who doesn't have a boss, I can't imagine what life, as I'm sure you can't, what life would be like working in one of these corporate worlds.
I do.
HR, HR departments are the cancer at the heart of our corporations and our military and everything else. That's how woke ideology has seeped into the broader sphere. It's through HR departments, and white men have been cowed into submission. The constant messaging from the media, from HR departments, from government, and everywhere else is that men are inheritors of white privilege. They're imbued, infected with
toxic masculinity.
With toxic masculinity. And of course, the only racism that's allowed today is anti-white racism. And misandry is something that's completely legitimate, whereas misogyny, of course, the slightest compliment to a lady will see you fired.
Indeed, I'm always amazed, actually. Again, we talk about, Macron v. Macron. Everyone's going, ha ha ha, Bridget Macron smashing her husband in the face. Isn't that hilarious? Oh, imagine, a man doing that to a woman. Totally unacceptable. Of course, he's stronger. But why is it funny and acceptable if a woman does it? The mockery of men in adverts now as well. Just dads are hopeless. They're hopeless at being, men are hopeless at being dads. They're hopeless at housework. Men are just genuinely useless and stupid. It's an incredible message to send out to our young boys and men, certainly. But again, I suppose the argument is that, white men, lots of people would say, white men had it too good for too long, and now's the backlash. What do you say to that?
Well, we know, of course, that whether you're talking about a reverse discrimination, affirmative action and policies in America and so forth, all of these things backfire. As soon as you try to discriminate in order to advance another group, that causes tension. We know all the unconscious bias training backfires terribly. We know that white working class boys are the most disadvantaged group in society. Yes. And that's because they're accused of being racist and, of course, being imbued with toxic masculinity as well. And yes, you're quite right. The emasculation of the white man on television adverts and all television programming, when you see a white man in a television advert, it has to be said.
This is a good point.
It's terribly dispiriting. And, of course, the world around us, everyone likes to hit on men. The world around us was built by men. The great buildings you see, the laws of this land, the government, everything in this world.
To be fair, we weren't allowed to do anything. We just had to have kids.
That's true. Now, you played an important role, but no one can deny that the world around us was created by the Western man. That's something that all men should be proud of. Not something you should be like, you didn't do it yourself, but it's time for men to actually stand up for themselves. Push back against all of this.
Very interesting. Thank you very much indeed. Always so fascinating to talk to you. Rafe Heydel Mankoo, royal commentator and, of course, historian as well.